I imagine that you guys have some experience working with multiplatform, yes? So I'm here to talk a little bit about it. So the idea behind this talk is basically have an overview for different options that we have and the different ways that we can tackle specific problems. This is our main goal. So we want to develop a native application, but the idea is basically have the availability to publish this app in the application store. So this is basically our main goal, or for us, or maybe for the business. So when I'm talking specifically native app, I'm not actually saying a mobile web application like optimized for the mobile device. We are talking about an application that we can deliver to the App Store, to be very specific. So as we mentioned, we want to deliver for both platforms. So of course, we have the native languages, like for Android, we have Java or Kotlin, and for iOS, we have Swift from Objective-C. But the idea is that not use like one language for the specific platform. The idea is maybe have like this flavor, like JavaScript, to one language or maybe one tool, like work with all. This could be very awesome, like to have just one base code and be able to maintain both applications. Just in like say, and on our mind could be very easy, but the reality is that we have different options. The options are like the native, the one that most of the people know nowadays, which basically is what the main, like the providers or the people who build the SDKs allow us to provide the best options, like access the functionality once they come out, or have the support that we need for the platform. But there are also alternative options like the hybrid applications. Ionic was one of the most popular ones, where you have like a web development team who have a lot of knowledge on doing development. So this is a very simple path in order to develop one mobile application, but which is basically HTML, CSS, like working on a web component on the mobile app. Is basically a web view. So you're still like having an APK calling an application, but it's a wrapper behind the web view. So the last option is the most common nowadays, which is a compiled native application. The most popular framework that we know are React Native, NativeScript, of course, Flutter. The idea behind these frameworks are more simple, or the idea is have performance-wise, the application should work better. They don't actually have a wrapper as Ionic has. They try to provide some kind of bridge between the UI components or some functionalities that the framework has. So we can like compare this option based on the way they compile. You have JavaScript specifically. So both of NativeScript and React, they actually compile the UI components in actual native code, but the rest of the code is basically is handled in a different thread. It's not native. So you have to manage the bridge between these two things. So it sometimes get a little bit harder to maintain. So in case of Dart, it's different as they actually compiling your code as a library specifically for ARM, which make it a little bit faster instead, but it's completely native. So this is something that people talk a lot, like the different subjectives for the platform. One of the people likes to say is write once and use everywhere. So we can compare them like in a graph. Don't get me wrong, like you have on the right side the one that most people use nowadays, where you have to write code for each platform. And on the left side, we have the tools that provide us like use one base code and ship everywhere. So the idea that they say that you can reuse the code is not completely true, because imagine the case that your application is very simple. Let's say a simple list of Twitter handles. So yes, that's worked perfectly. But if you try to create something specific for Android, for iOS, you start like actually going to the gray part of the frameworks. So the other side we can talk about is about learn once and deploy everywhere. It's a similar method that we saw before. So the idea is also the same, but is use the platform features like the device per se, like GPS, all the kind of stuff. But the idea is that the language follows some kind of the same base code, and you don't have sometimes the same, for example, the GPS. The way you can answer the GPS in Android and iOS is completely different depending which framework you are using. So the approach is basically write the UI component per set, and then you try to provide the functionality for each platform. So another one is the one that we actually care as a developers is the popularity and the coverage. How easily is for us to find other people that can actually help us, or is the framework very maintainable, or is very popular that you can talk with another developer and find a solution very quickly. So this is not necessarily like a great option if you are not a big company, but if we have the native SDKs that are mainly maintained by Google or Apple. When you have all the support you may find, so you have Stack Overflow, they actually give us a lot of documentation, but on the other side you have React, so which is mainly maintained by Facebook. Yes, it's a pretty big community, but it's more specifically for the web. So when we're talking about mobile specific React Native, it's a little bit different or harder to find solutions. For example, there are components that are not available for the platform, like maps is something very simple when you are on your own in some kind of places. So performance is something that people like to talk about a lot, but if you are a very bad developer, I would say, don't even think about Ionic. But in the case of React, on Flutter, they are based on different approach. Because these offer like real native apps. They compile your code, part of the code, to the machine language. So, which is completely different for Ionic. I can say this is a pretty good idea solution for people who have experience working on JavaScript specifically. Performance-wise, I can say that it's really good because you can manage the way where limit your application just to have very small functionalities, and it's more based on UI components. So the native, I don't even want to talk about it because they are very straightforward. If you are actually using the framework, you are directly using the features. So it was gonna be like if you are doing very bad things, it's the only way you can find like performance problems. So this is the part that we maybe want to talk a little bit more, is the real world scenarios. We've seen companies like the most popular scenario we heard nowadays is Airbnb. They have like 60% of the base code of the application written on React Native. But the reality is, for us, is not the same. So if you are a small company, you don't have the knowledge or the resources to develop or create the infrastructure to maintain this application. It's a little bit harder for you in the long way to maintain. So we can do like a quick comparison. It's very relative similar from the performance view. So it's like, for example, Flutter, I can say, is a new kid in town where Google is spending a lot of money and resources, and they are actually giving developers the imagination that is something for the future, but it's very hard nowadays to develop something in Flutter because you don't have all the components necessarily for your platform. But it's something that is a prototype or something, an MVP you can build, maybe you can use it. So this is part of the introduction of the talk. So I will talk a lot about me. I'm Noe Branagan. I'm basically based in Brazil. I'm from Dominican Republic. This is the way people work over there, under the beach, drinking piña coladas, the stuff. I have a little bit experience working on emerging markets. So I used to work for Orange, which is a telecommunication company. we have a lot of application in Africa and in Latin America also. So the problems that we had are more specifically with fragmentations. So when we have a very low-end devices, and the reality is like, for example, notifications is something that is very popular nowadays, and using these frameworks is completely out of the mind how to find a solution for that. So it's when, for example, this is one of the most popular cases on major markets. In China, it's completely different. For example, all the other solutions that you may find out using web applications, WebChat is a hybrid application, but they have a lot of resources of developers. They have a lot of experience working for mobile. If this is not your case, don't even try it. I will recommend you to totally to go native. In the case of React Native, nowadays is the most popular use for web developers, as companies have a lot of components built for the web. They can reuse these components for the mobile. But the problem I can see is basically related with when you have a very huge product, when the roadmap is very long, so you need to understand how is this application going to be evolving a lot? Is we going to start adding a lot of features? Because it become a little bit harder to maintain in terms of infrastructure. So the best scenario, always we say this is building for the both platforms, but in my experience right now, I can say that React is the best option that we can talk about. But the reality is, like, it's very hard to find a unicorn. Like, if you have a group of developers, this is a couple of topics that you can actually care about. You may find different scenarios for each specific case. If your developers are web developers, you may find React Native or NativeScript the best solution for you. But in the case that you don't have any option, you can go and use maybe Flutter, because it's a new language. It's very easy to learn. It's very type of language. So if the people know Java, maybe JavaScript, they can get very used to. So it's basically, we as developers, we need to find just the best option for the business. So we need to ship faster and try to find a product we can involve. So this is basically what I want to talk to you guys. If you have any question about my experience, I'm open to answer anything.